Hey guys, today I thought I would do a video on evaluations, how to evaluate dogs with other dogs, because this is a question I get a lot when I start encouraging people to socialize their dog or go out and meet dogs. I don't usually encourage so much leash to leash greetings, but go out and join play groups or go to dog parks, and I get the question a lot, well, how do I tell if a dog is aggressive? And I'm going to give just kind of a quick overview here and then deep dive into this in other videos because I could talk about this for days. So there's days of information on this. I'm also going to kind of keep this focus on if you should meet a dog or if your dog should meet a dog rather than like the whole interaction unfolding after that, because that's a lot of information. And of course, the answer to how to tell if a dog is aggressive is not so simple. So there's a lot of stuff in the dog world about like if a dog wags their tail they're happy, or if a dog growls they're angry, or if a dog whatever. And that's really way oversimplifying dog behavior. There is not one single behavior that means one single thing always. And of course, another thing is that a dog being aggressive or not depends on the situation too. It depends on the dog it's interacting with. So for the purposes of this, I'm going to give you as much detail as I can about what I look for and how I do evaluations, and also some resources in the bio, the description under here, about where you can go to find out more. And this is a situation where it's really helpful to compare learning and understanding dog behavior to learning and understanding human behavior or a language. So if you wanted to be fluent in a language, like you wanted to go be fluent in French or whatever, you would go to France somewhere in France, and if your goal was to become as fluent as possible, you would only speak French, only live with French people, and only use French to get things that you needed in life. Like if you needed food, you have to go to the grocery store and interact with people in French. That would be the fastest route to learn French. And it would still take you like 9 months to a year to be fluent-ish, and then a lifetime to understand all the nuances of French. So you could continuously learn French throughout your whole life, through nuances, improve your understanding of the French language, or how different people speak French. So maybe like different parts of France, or if you go to different places in Africa where they speak French. There's a lot of places who speak French, Canada. You would have a lot of work ahead of you, a lifetime of work to get really fluent at it. And it's not that different with dog body language. And it kind of even is on the same timeline. So if you're interested in learning dog body language, the best thing to do is immerse yourself in dogs interacting with other dogs. So one of the best ways to do this is working at a dog daycare or something, or managing play groups where you get to see dogs interacting with dogs. And it's important to see a lot of different dogs interacting with dogs, not just the same couple of dogs interacting with dogs, and those dogs interacting with a lot of different dogs in a lot of different situations. So not just like the same 4 dogs interacting with the same 4 dogs, or the same 4 dogs interacting with different dogs. That is helpful, but just like if you went to France to learn French and you spoke English to a bunch of Americans, your progress would be a lot slower. Or if you only talked to 5 French people, your progress would be a lot slower than if you talk to as many French people as you can. Or French speaking people. So it's the same thing with dogs. You really need to see a lot of dogs interacting with a lot of different dogs in a lot of different situations. And usually working with dogs is the best way to do that. So it's not, and it would still take you like 9 months to a year to get really good at understanding it, and then you would still have a lot of nuances like, okay, when I work with this breed or a working line of this breed, like I've been seeing golden retrievers my whole life, but I've never seen working line golden retrievers, and they interact differently, and there's more nuances to their behavior. So you're continuously learning, and then, hopefully you only run onto some really creepy dogs, and you may work in a field like behavior modification or something with a behaviorist where you see creepy dogs a lot, or you might work in a daycare where you hopefully don't see too many creepy dogs. So that would be a whole nother thing for you to learn. So just keep comparing it to like learning body language in people or learning a language in people. And then once you get to be sort of fluent, you get more of a feel for it. It becomes more intuitive than it does about breaking things down. So it's like you could say, this person has a better understanding of the French language than this person, or speaks French better, or whatever, however you want to classify it. So just like understanding a foreign language, or even just understanding human behavior, when you get kind of fluent in it, you get a feel for it, rather than being able to point out certain things. It may take some educating to be able to point out certain things. So like my job as a manager of a dog daycare is to be able to recognize behavior and then point out what things make me feel that way. So I go like, I'm uncomfortable with this dog, I don't want to put it with this dog, or I feel like it shouldn't be with this type of dog. And then my job is to describe why, based on the behavior I'm seeing, okay, this dog's doing this, this, and this, that makes me think that. And usually newer people get a sense pretty well, like they're like, the dog gives me the weird, heebie-jeebies, but they don't know how to break it down. So sometimes it takes some educating to be able to go, okay, this is a 10-point argument for why I feel this way. And that still does not mean that you would feel that way with another dog. So you could still get those same 10 behaviors and be like, it weirds me out, but I don't get the feeling that this dog is really serious or he's going to do harm, and this dog I do. So it's kind of partly being able to make a bulleted list of things, but mostly kind of getting a feeling once you get a better understanding of the dog's behavior. There's a couple resources I would look into for this. My favorite go-to one is Sue Sternberg's Assessing Dog-to-Dog Interactions. I find that to be a really clear, like, low risk to high risk description of evaluating dog-to-dog interactions on leash, and also off leash, so in play groups. And it covers a lot of things that, after working with dogs for many years, I pay a lot of attention to, that I tend to see newer people not pay as much attention to. So like that's a DVD that I'll show my staff, and they'll be like, oh, that they don't really, like, that was interesting, but they were kind of expecting a breakdown of like, and this is this kind of snarl, and this is that kind of snarl, and this, and it's less that. It's more like the intensity of it. But that's what I like about it. And it also deals with some stuff like shared personal space and things that other trainers don't talk about as much. There's also quite a few resources from Patricia McConnell. There's like a dog play seminar. And also Sarah Kilnice. I'm not entirely sure how you pronounce her name, but I'll post it in the description. And I've seen her live and I still can't pronounce her name properly. But anyway, Sarah Kilnice, whatever. She has a good like dog behavior DVD if you're just interested in breaking down the dog behaviors. But if you're looking for like, what does that mean? Is that mean the dog is high risk or low risk? The Sue Sternberg DVD is really good for that. So on that note about intensity is a lot what determines whether I feel a behavior is risky or not risky. So it doesn't necessarily mean good or bad, but when I, let's say, have a dog next to me that is about to go into a playroom of dogs, and my job is to make sure that goes well, or goes into a new dog park or whatever, some new play group. Intensity of behaviors means a lot. So how intensely that dog reacts to things, how fast it is, and how intensely that behavior lasts. So like if that dog smells pee of a dog and like rushes over it and then is like totally mesmerized by the pee, that would be much more concerning to me than if the dog's like, there's pee everywhere, I don't care, like dogs, this is a dog place. So intensity means a lot. That's one of the first things I'm looking for. And the reason intensity matters is because when you're communicating with another being, if I I think a lot of that, the giant head salesman from Pee-wee. So if I open the door or meet you for the first time and I just overwhelm you, that doesn't give you any time to respond to me. And it also doesn't give me any time to read you. So if I just am like, hey, I gotta, like that kind of person at a party, I give you no chance to, like, hey, are you into this interaction? Or for you to go, oh, maybe I'm not into this interaction, I'm not reading you at all. So if a dog's super intense, that means, for me, of course, managing the dogs, that it's probably going to be, the interactions are going to go much faster. It's going to be much harder for me to interrupt a dog that's really intense about things. So once the interaction gets to a point I'm uncomfortable with, it will be harder for me to stop. But also, that dog's not checking in other dogs to see if they're reading things. So if you're just like assessing dogs on leash, and a dog is like crazy wound up intense about greeting your dog, or crazy wound up intense about your dog entering the play group or whatever, and is not being interrupted, like can't be interrupted or whatever, or is not being interrupted, I would not proceed with that. So a dog that's not reading another dog, not giving the other dog time, is rude, potentially rude, and is more likely to elicit something bad happening. It's the same for people, so that's a pretty easy one. So let's say I have a dog with me that's about to enter a group of dogs. What do I look for? Or I have a dog that I see coming that wants to greet my dog. What do I look for? Or I'm about to go into a dog park. What do I look for? So firstly, when I'm doing evaluations in daycare, I do a bunch of questions that I ask the owner, and I kind of talk to the owner, and I'm very curious about how the owner acts with their dog, and if they give me some sort of like red flag things, like they circle he's aggressive with dogs or something, which they sometimes do when they're about to go into a playroom. So I have that to reference, but I really, having done this for a long time, don't want to have my opinion too affected by what the owner says. And the same thing goes for breed relevance. So definitely there are some breeds who interact differently. Like I tend to see patterns of behaviors from certain breeds more than others. But I don't want that to affect my evaluation too much. So I kind of try to like listen to the owner, and then I really want not too much influence on how I'm evaluating the dog, even from other staff. If they're like, he seems creepy or he seems whatever, that's important information, but I really want to just go, well, does he seem creepy to me? Because I want to give a pretty fair shot to all the dogs. So another thing, if you don't have that, obviously, the best next thing is to see the dog interacting with dogs. So if you are at a dog park and you can watch the dogs for a minute, or going into a play group and you can watch the dogs for a minute, you get a pretty good sense of how the dogs are with other dogs. Like this dog is kind of relentless in playing. He's not asking permission. This dog comes on really strong. This dog will play with dogs that aren't into it at all, like are hiding under a chair or something. And that's all, for puppies, that's all pretty goofy and malleable, so I wouldn't worry about it too much. For dogs under 6 months, that's what I mean by puppies, dogs that do not have their adult teeth in. But after that, you can start to be like, okay, I'm not going to bring my dog into this play group. I'm not going to bring my dog into this dog park, or I might like keep a really close eye on that dog and kind of redirect into something else because I know my dog's not going to be that into it. So I try to start with as much of a clean slate as possible, but I prefer to see the dogs interacting before, if possible, especially if you're kind of new to this. Watching the dogs interact first is a really good kind of clue, and like that dog's really intense or whatever. And do use your feelings in this. So like it's okay if you can't describe it, or if the owner says like don't put too much weight on, oh, he's like that, or he just barks a lot, or whatever it is. Some dogs do, but I want you to use your feeling. If you're like, ooh, he seems really, or, you know, like he's coming on strong, or like he's really goofy, or whatever it is, he seems like a sweet dog, like he gets all goofy and silly when dogs come in, then, or he seems to get so goofy and silly that it's like kind of weird, like he's like groveling forever to your dog. Use your feeling about that. Use your intuition, which you do sort of have, because, you know, dog behavior is not that different from human behavior. I mean, in the actual behaviors, it is in many ways the opposite, like how we greet and stuff, but in the vibes of like that's really intense, or that seems very polite, or that dog's very sweet, it should feel the same to you in a lot of ways. So trust your intuition, your gut about that when you're evaluating dogs for your dog to play with. Then when I bring the dog in to meet other dogs and there's some sort of barrier there, so say we're gonna go into a playroom of dogs or into a dog park, and my preference is actually that there are quite a few dogs that I know in the room. So not like just a few. So I say that because if a dog's entering a playroom with quite a few dogs, if they're going to try to pull something, they tend to kind of try it a couple times and like chicken out because it's intimidating, and I can catch that and pull the dog out of the room. So if I have a dog that's potentially dog aggressive and there's 2 dogs in the room, they'll tend to target those 2, or maybe feel more confidence to go after those 2 dogs than if there's more dogs. So the downside of this is always a flip side. I need to know the dogs in the room pretty well, or have a good vibe for them, because if there are more dogs in the room and things go south and I don't catch it early enough, the disaster afterwards is going to be much worse. So dogs are very cooperative, and they're very cooperative about predatory behavior. So it's very easy for something to flip from kind of an odd exchange with two dogs to a bunch of dogs like pack mobbing another dog. So like all the dogs cooperatively agreeing they're gonna beat the snot out of this dog, and that's kind of hairy and a scary experience if you haven't had it happen. If I have my choice, it's a dog meeting quite a few dogs I know. If not, and quite a few would be like 10 or 20 dogs is quite a lot. A few number would be like 3. So, and if that's the case, I definitely want them moving in a lot of space so that I have more time to breed them. And I'd also preferably have somebody helping me. So the next thing is I want to see that the dog is a little uncomfortable going into this. Like the dog that I'm evaluating. I don't want to see a dog that, if a dog goes to a dog park every day or goes to daycare every day, they have kind of a flow of things, but I should still see some nerves a little. Just like if you were to go to a party and you knew nobody there versus if you went to this party every Friday or whatever and you knew everyone there. So I want to see some like, and even if you knew everyone there, you'd have a moment of like, ooh, we're going into a social interaction where I'm going to have to navigate exchanges with people that I'm not familiar with. So there might be some nerves still. So I want to see some like, oh, this is a lot of dogs or something when I see the dog go in. And if the dog's like, let me in, man, yo, that's a little bit of a red flag. And I would see if I could work with that dog to tone them down, or if they just continue to escalate in their like excitement level. And if they do, I would probably pull them and not put them in. So if they're kind of nervous, and it's even normal to see some like if a dog gets up in their face in the gate to growl at that dog, that's not that abnormal. That's why I preferably have somebody else managing the other side, keeping dogs kind of aligned, because there's still dogs that are going to want to be right up in their grill, and it's not abnormal for the dog that I'm evaluating to be sort of uncomfortable with that. So I'd be like, ooh, dude. But when they go in, so say they look a little nervous, they look a little hesitant, they're like doing a little bit of negotiating and redirecting, like they're not like staring in dogs' faces and pounding at the gate to get in. They're kind of like, oh, I don't know if I want to go in. That's a good sign. So I'm going to let the dog in, try to give them as much space. And I usually do like a 3-second sniff rule for dogs. So I want to interrupt anything longer than a 3-second sniff when the dog goes in. And it's expected, if you're taking your dog into a play group of dogs, that your dog's comfortable being just like randomly, it's a little mosh pitty. So randomly sniffed by dogs without too much permission. If your dog has really impeccable social skills and is used to a lot of checking and consent and communication before greeting, then your dog probably doesn't find that to be the most wonderful experience. This happens a lot to dogs that are do have really nice social skills, or dogs over the age of like 3 that are just not into this environment anymore. So they're not into like the crazy party. So totally normal. Your dog just may want fewer dogs at the dog park, or just dogs they know at the dog park, or go at off peak times, or not go to the dog park and do something else. So anyway, if I put the dog in, I kind of want the 3-second rule of sniffs. I don't want to interrupt anything longer than 3 seconds. I want to try to keep the dogs moving, because that keeps the dog from feeling like he's trapped or stuck. And when a dog is trapped or stuck, you'll see like this series of warnings usually that leads up into some sort of aggressive thing. So like the dog will get sniffed and they'll freeze, and that's the first sign, like, okay, dude, you're sniffing me and I don't know who you are, so it's a little weird. And then they might do like a muzzle check, or even show their teeth and do like a muzzle check, which is where they turn around, or half of a muzzle check, where they turn around and like pop at the dog, or there's just a fast head movement, a fast flick, and that's the dog saying like, ooh, this is much, or they'll fall over or something. But all of those signs, they'll fall over, and some dogs will pee on themselves and like wiggle their tail. All of those signs, including the one where your dog falls over, are signs to say, this is a lot and I would like you to back off. And so if the back off does not happen from any of those, like the muzzle check, the dog kind of zipping out of there, the dog snarling, freezing, hackles go up, the dog falls over, any of those things are like, whoa man, a little bit much. And if the dog doing it doesn't respect that, then it could easily proceed to aggression. So even though it looks submissive, which is why I don't really like that term, because it's saying it's a cutoff. It's like, please, that's a lot. Could you tone it down? Okay, you're not well. That's a problem. So the next thing would be that the dog would go off on the dogs, and I want to avoid that. So that's why I try to keep the dogs moving and keep a 3-second sniff rule. And that can be kind of hard when you're in a dog park, which is one of the challenges of dog parks, is you're working with a bunch of people who don't know anything about dogs for the most part, or what their dog behavior is like, or defend really inappropriate behaviors. And so that's what I'm looking for when I'm entering a dog into a play group of dogs. I want the dog to be a little hesitant. I want to give the dog space and movement once we get in. I would preferably have somebody that's interrupting the dog so that the initial entrance into the room or play group or dog park or whatever goes smoothly, so they're not all clogging the dog up. And then after that, you get into the whole nuances of dog interactions and dog's play. So we're not going to get into that this video. We will in another video. If it's an on-leash greeting, I do not love on-leash greetings. I know it's a practical, like it's a thing that happens a lot, but I don't try to aim for that. If I do on-leash greetings, I really want both dogs to have like a pretty heavy take it or leave it attitude. So I don't want two dogs intensely pulling and choking and going nuts at each other. Even if that interaction goes well, I don't like encouraging that. Like we're going to the dog and it gets more exciting, and we're definitely going to the dog over and over and over again, because it's a lack of self-control, and that kind of builds up your dog's emotional arousal, which you don't want. So it's like every time I see a dog, I pull really hard and I go crazy, and then we get closer and closer, and then we get there, and that's intense for the dog being approached. So that is not how dogs approach each other. And it's more likely to elicit aggression, because again, the dog is not giving any chance to go like, hey, you cool with this? Or like, let me pause for a second. The dog's coming on very strongly. So if the dog has a nonchalant, like, I could go up to you, I could not go up to you, I look at you, I look away, those are the dogs that you can greet on leash, and that has to be the same for your dog. So, or if the dog does kind of like a little, like what would be considered submissive, but it's more like appeasement behavior, like kind of shrimps up to your dog, I can take that too, although I still want it to have the same level of sort of, it's a little more intense than the take it or leave it, so that's still intense. And I've seen that unfold poorly a lot of times, because the dog's still not asking permission. Even if you're like super submissive or whatever, so submissive meaning the dog's low to the ground, the dog's peeing on itself, the dog's approaching indirectly under the other dog frequently, they're still not checking to see if the dog wants this, or giving the dog enough time to, the dog they're approaching, giving the dog enough time to respond, so it can still go poorly. The dog's like, yeah, I know you're like peeing on yourself and groveling all over the place, but like, I don't want to say hi to you, yo. So that's another thing to kind of look out for. But with on-leash greetings, I really want both dogs to be like, hey, what up? It's cool. And then like sniff each other, and then, okay, good, we're good. And on a last note, I really like for the moment right before the dogs actually make contact to be sort of interrupted. So if a dog wants to go in the playroom and has, you know, they're about to go in, their face is up at the gate, and we've evaluated them enough to feel comfortable putting them in to a play group, I want to see some interruption from that focused trying to get in the gate, door, whatever, before I let them in. So I want the second before that to just be a small interruption to cycle down that emotional arousal just a second. So like they're staring at the gate, they're thinking really hard about the gate, and I want 1 second for them to be like, what's up? Or like, why aren't we going? Something that's like a look away, a thought away from that, and then I'll open the gate for that. So, and it's the same with on-leash greetings if possible. So I want an interruption for a second right before the dogs greet, and then when the dogs are close to each other before they approach. Which is why, one of the reasons I don't like on-leash greeting is because the other greeter, I mean, people with their dog on leash usually just walk it right like a magnet, like you can see them coming across the with their dog, and that's all very intense for your dog and not permissive. So the dog's not, the owner and the dog are not like, hey, you cool with greeting? Or like, let me read you a little bit. They're just coming at you. So I can interrupt my dog and do my part, but don't accept, it's really rare that someone's going to do that for their dog. So just don't expect that, which is another reason I don't love introducing dogs when I'm working with people who don't know anything about dogs, which is a lot of situation you're going to be in. But still, you can control your interruption, and you can definitely like read for a moment when you're about to enter, when everything seems the chillest before you open the door. Like everybody's like, we're staring at each other, it's kind of intense, and then they're like, oh, this is getting old. And then that's the moment you want to like, ugh, this is boring. That's the moment when you want to introduce dogs on the other side and your dog too. So you can't do that as much on leash, which is why it's a little bit riskier introduction. And then it's riskier for many other reasons too, because you're interrupting so much of the dog's communication. So that's my advice for just evaluating dogs on the fly. And notice it doesn't go too much into like the dog's tail's wagging or the dog's, that is not going to get you anywhere but trouble if you're breaking it down like that. Intensity is important. There's some other body language stuff that is important, which we will go into in other videos, but don't break it down so much by what the dog's individual things are doing, like its ears or whatever. Break it down more by, does that make you feel, does the dog feel kind of intense? Does that feel wound up? Does whatever it means, and really don't discount it. Just like assess the dog as is. Not like, but he loves other dogs so much, or like, but he loves playing, or but he always barks, whatever it is. Assess it by, is it really intense? If a person was doing this kind of equivalent thing to you, would that rub you a little bit the wrong way? I'd be like, wow, this is kind of an intense interaction. So just like with people, you're looking for someone who reads you well, responds to you well, is interested in what you have to say and what you're doing when you're interacting with people who have good social skills, and you get a kind of a feel for it. You want to think along the same lines when introducing your dog or a dog to a group of other dogs or dogs on leash.